What do you mean there's no bathroom for you here?
There is no bathroom. There are no colored bathrooms in this building, or any building outside the West Campus, which is half a mile away. Did you know that?
The world is made of differences, whether it be looks, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, religion, location, language, ability. Oh, that was a lot. Everyone is different. However, our media often doesn't show this, with most stories focusing on the perceived norm, i.e. the tales of straight, white, male and able-bodied characters. In recent years, however, there's been a step towards a change, which has been met with joy, trepidation, and calls of PC culture. Diversity and representation is important, but so is your intention behind it. For example, are you including a woman of colour because you want to, or because you think it will benefit you in the long run? Are you introducing a trans character with research off the internet, or do you know someone who is trans who is happy to speak to you about their experiences? Whatever the case, the intention, execution and understanding of representation is important to know before writing. Often when people hear the word representation these days, it comes with the connotation of doing it for the sake of brownie points. And while it's true that there are many companies, Disney, who are doing that a lot these days, representation and diversity is still important to think about when writing, whatever the format. These characters, when written for the sake of being written, they are usually cardboard cutouts of the people that they are actually meant to represent. It is here that writers and audiences begin to believe that representation is only used for representation's sake. There is no originality with these characters. There's no originality as a whole. Now, I want to challenge this way of thinking because I know, and there is, more things you can do with these characters than you may think. Take the cinematic series Warrior, a show influenced by Bruce Lee and set during the Tong Wars of San Francisco in the 1870s. The series follows as Sam, who travels to San Fran to find his sister, only to be sold to the Hop Ways, one of the most powerful Tongs. Now, not only does the show predominantly follow the Chinese characters in the original Chinatown, but it also speaks to the culture of the time, and not just in terms of race. In the case of Warrior, it was language, and the visual technique of dialogue that not only grasped my attention to the story and its characters, but also helped us, the audience, to see and identify with the multiple perspectives we experience: the Chinese, the Americans, and the Irish. And this scene is a perfect example of it.
Not bad looking though. Oh my, getting sticky with her.
This dialogue and filming technique of showing the disconnect of language barriers is a fascinating use of scripting to show diversity, as well as the strength behind it. Like our lead as Sam, who speaks both Cantonese and English, we the audience can also feel the disconnect between these two groups due to language and culture separation. This was a fascinating technique that the writers and directors used to their advantage. And while Warrior may not be everyone's cup of tea due to the violence and language, no one can deny that the representation of different cultures within one world and how different and yet similar they are is very well done. When writing culturally and ethnically diverse stories and characters, understanding what sets them apart from their opposites and what also makes them the same is imperative to making the characters and the story feel real. Stereotypes do exist, but they shouldn't be heavily relied upon. Your character is just like any other character. They're human. It may just be that there is something else about them that sets them apart. Whatever the case, respect your character and who they represent, because what you do makes a difference. Take queer representation, for example. Now, as a queer woman myself, the representation that I've seen is few and far between, and often has rather devastating consequences, which often makes me worry, am I gonna suddenly die from a stray bullet at one point in my future when I finally express my love to the woman of my life? It's possible, it happens so often, it's very, very possible that that could happen. Now, we don't really have guns in the UK, well, who knows? It's the magic of lesbian death, who knows what could happen. As a whole though, there are many different examples of ways in which queer representation has been shown in the media and throughout history as a whole. But instead of just looking at the history side of things, I will recommend a video for you guys to check out, which is Just Right, a history of LGBT film in Hollywood. I got that title wrong, but it's linked down below. Go check it out because it is a fascinating watch. I also recommend looking at the Lexa Deserved Better movement because it did a lot of good for the queer representation movement, and as a whole it was just a fantastic thing that the queer community did after what happened to Lexa in the 100. But I'll let you guys look that up instead of talking about it in this video. Today, however, while there is so much negativity in the queer representation market, I want to look at something positive instead. Enter One Day at a Time, a show that features all kinds of representation from religious, mental health, cultural, and of course, queer representation with its character, Elena. However, what set the show apart was not only focusing on Elena's coming out, but also her mother, Penelope's, response to it. What was profound about Penelope's reaction was how she admits that she feels weird about Elena's sexuality, but shows how desperate she is to be accepting and not let Elena feel unloved and unsupported. She speaks to her gay friends, talks it out with her confidant Schneider, and even does research. Also, Elena could have a good coming out story and experience. Now, I'm not saying that all queer representation should have a positive reaction, because that's just not realistic, unfortunately. However, what made this realistic and different to what has been presented previously was the focus on the mother's feelings. Penelope feels odd about Elena being gay. She sees her daughter differently now, justifiably, and she is angry at herself for that fact. It is this admittance of a struggle, the attempt to better her knowledge in both a serious and comedic way, that makes the impact of this coming out episode powerful. It isn't inserted for views, it wasn't over-exaggerated for drama, and it didn't end in tragedy. Instead, each character's reaction and response were explored and examined, with internal thoughts able to be spoken aloud without judgment, to help better the character and their development. Every person is different. Each experience is unique, and to express that through your characters, both that of the queer representation and those around them, and their actions and reactions with and without judgment, not only will your story progress and develop, but so will your characters. Representation is important. While you should never include representation for representation's sake, as a creative person, you have to recognise that there are more people to an audience than what is traditionally targeted. If you do plan to introduce characters that are different to yourself, such as a woman of colour, a trans man, and so forth, be aware that what you write is exponentially more important when it comes to getting it right. If you do not have the same experience as your character, do not act as if you do. Research. By research, I don't mean Wikipedia. It's good for, when you want to blag research for university, but when you're actually talking about real people and you're exploring real people in your work, first-hand experience is nearly always the best way to go, as long as you get permission from the person you want to ask the experience of to ask them questions. Say you have a trans friend, for example, and you want to write a character about a trans person in your story or your film or whatever. If they're comfortable, ask them some questions about their experience, whether it be coming out as trans, the process, or anything like that, but do it within reason. Be respectful when you are asking them. I know I've had problems like that in the past, and most writers do, because it's not something you usually think about. Usually you do research online and that's fine. But when it comes to real people, knowing a person's experience firsthand is often incredibly beneficial. Of course, if you don't have someone you can ask the experience of, at the end of everything there are such things as sensitivity readers, which admittedly I didn't actually know about until I listened to the Writing Excuses podcast. Now, sensitivity readers basically ask people from that community who will read through your work, and obviously other communities as well, but will read through your work and make sure that you haven't done it wrong, you haven't been offensive in your work, and it is very useful to have. There is a lot to be gained from including characters different from yourself in your work. It gives you the creative opportunity to step out from your comfort zone and do something you and an audience wouldn't expect. It could be using music like hip hop and R&B to present a character's interests and personality, as well as a connection to their culture, like Miles Morales in Into the Spider-Verse, which, if you want to learn more about the importance of music in this movie, check out Sideways' video Sound of the Spider-Verse, linked below. Or you could incorporate a real-life story with an intriguing concept, like Sue Thomas, the first deaf woman to become an undercover specialist of lip reading for the FBI, whose story is shown in the series Sue Thomas, FBI. Whatever you decide when it comes to your writing, if you choose to introduce characters of different backgrounds and experiences into your work, there are two things that are most important to remember. Always do your research, as in detail and direct from the source that you can. And the ways you can introduce, create and write these characters are endless. You just need to take that first step. If you want to understand more about representation and as a whole just understand it a little bit more, I have linked a bunch of exercises, video explorations and craft text that you can use to help benefit your understanding. There'll be such things as Writing Excuses, Writing the Other podcast episode, and Pop Trigger's video. Representation in the media is more important than you may think. As well as those, there will be the link to my Google Drive, which will have all the things that I used for this video, extra bonus material, some writing exercises that you can use, and a bunch of other good stuff which will be related to this video in particular, as well as all my other past writing study videos. All of this and more is linked in the description box down below. As a whole, I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it, and I hope it helped in your understanding of representation in some form. If you go to the description box down below, you'll find the information for all of this video, including the craft text I used and a bunch of other information, as well as my social media links, my merchandise store and my Patreon. If you want more writing study videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already. Again, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next time.